Hey guys, and welcome to a top table gaming video. This is top 10 Middle-earth SBG tips for beginners. Hi guys, I'm Top Table Steve, thanks for joining me. This is a quick video for beginners really. We've had a big influx of players since the new rules for Middle-earth SBG, and I just thought there'd be a couple of things that we could point out for the newer players, or even just for older players to brush up on the skills, that things that they may have sort of started to not forget, but not brush up on as much as they should. We've got 10 tips. If this video does well and you enjoy it, please comment below and I'll do more. There's loads of things, and we could have done top 30 tips, but the video would have been 2 hours long. We don't want that. So if you want to see more videos like this, then please comment below, let us know, like the video, share the video, and if you're a new subscriber, make sure you click the bell button so you get notified when we release new videos. Before we get into some examples, tip number 1 is don't be afraid to lose. This is massive when you come into any game, not just Middle-earth SBG. The best way to learn is by playing games and losing to things that you think, didn't know you could do that, I'm not going to let that happen again. Things like that. Don't be afraid to lose. I lost a lot at the beginning of when I first started playing. So anyone who watched the GBHL channel with Bat Reps when I used to take part in, I lost a hell of a lot. But I learned so much. A lot of the tips that I'm going to show you in this video, I learned from losing. So don't be afraid to lose and enjoy it. Take it as a learning process, take it as a challenge. Don't get disheartened, because it will happen if you play more experienced players and you've only just started playing the game. Another very important one is one that's so basic and so obvious, but so many people forget it. I'm terrible for forgetting this myself. I do it all the time. I start playing a game and I just want the lines to clash and I want to roll dice and I want to kill things, but play the scenario. Whatever scenario you're playing, they all have different objectives, different ways of winning, different little tips and tricks how to win the scenario. Not all scenarios you will win by killing more opponents. Not all scenarios you will win by killing more of your opponent's troops. Some scenarios are objective grabbers, and things like once you get reduced to 25, the game ends, and then you're counting up what objectives you have, and you get VPs for those, and you could be getting absolutely smashed. You could be broken. You could have had your leader wounded. But if you're holding all the objectives when the game ends, highly likely you're going to win. So it's things like that. Just bear in mind the objectives. Play to your army's strengths and don't play to your enemy's strengths, and don't be focusing too much on what they're able to do to you. Start thinking about what you can do in the scenario and what your army is able to do to theirs. As you can see here in this situation, we have an Iron Hills warrior who is trapped against the wall of a fort. He's going to be in deep trouble if he loses that fight. To give you a better chance of surviving the fight, you want to double the amount of dice that you roll. So if you shield, you can do that. You also have friendly models in the vicinity who could possibly come and help out. So shielding is a way of holding up the enemy another turn, surviving that round of combat till your friends can get to you and help out. So shielding is a nice little tactic in situations like this. As you can see, the Iron Hills warrior is outnumbered and trapped against the wall by Gundabad Captain and Gundabad Warrior, and we are outnumbering on the other side against the Gundabad Bannerman. What this can do when you shield is it can make your Iron Hills warrior, or anyone who's in that position, it increases their chances, shall we say, of sticking around for another turn and surviving that round of combat, which in turn gives your reinforcements time to get over and help him. So in this situation, we would roll 2 dice, which increases doubles our chances of rolling higher than the Gundabads in this situation and surviving the round of combat. Over here we're fairly confident we're outnumbering. got the higher fight value, we're doing very well. We can kill this bannerman no problem. And as we can see now, our chances of winning this fight and all three surviving are very favourable, and that is why shielding is one of the, in my opinion, most powerful special rules in the game. One of many situations where positioning is key in this game is situations like you can see now. A doorway, a bottleneck between rocks or ruins, anything like that, where you can use a small number of your models. If your models have a high defense and have the shield wall special rule, even better, as is in this case. In this position, these three Iron Hills warriors, I'd be fairly comfortable that these guys could hold up any number of goblins getting through this doorway for 2, 3, possibly 4 turns. They can take a beating, no problem. The high defense and the fact that they can shield gives you a very, very good chance of winning the combats and beating your opponent back. So your opponent could have a good half of their force try to get through this bottleneck or doorway, and you're able to keep them at bay whilst the rest of your army takes on the other part of their army, and you outnumber them on another part of the board. Trapping your enemy is always something that you should try and keep an eye out for, really. It gives you a chance, even in situations like this. You know, you've got normal warriors, i.e. the goblin mercenaries, fighting against an enemy hero who's got a much higher fight value. There is the chance that they won't roll a 6 and can roll badly. If they roll badly and you're a 1-on-1, you're still only rolling 1 dice, and it much increases their chance. If you trap the opponent, they roll badly, and you're able to win that combat, you're in a much better position. You're rolling far more dice because you're rolling double attacks to wound. It's a great tip to try and always remember when moving your warriors around. Even against non-hero models, it's far more powerful against your enemy troops. If you're able to trap and outnumber your opponent, it increases your dice rolls and therefore increases the chance of killing your opponent's army. Of course, this is a double-edged sword against a hero. They have multiple attacks. If you do lose the combat, they could take down more than one at a time. But this is a tactic where you need to sort of use it in your games and see what you're most comfortable with and whether you think the risk is worth taking or not. In a situation where you've got a hero who's out of might, I think it's a risk that I would take on certain occasions. But against enemy troops, you try and trap as often as you can and just whittle them down. If your enemy is rolling 1 dice and you're rolling 3, 4, 5 to win the fight, and then you're doubling that to 8 or 10 dice to wound, it gives you a massive advantage. And on the flip side of that, always try and take care when positioning, when you do charge, to put yourself in positions where you cannot be trapped. It's not always possible once the melee kicks off, and you know it's a mess of miniatures all over the place. But do bear it in mind when you're moving around the board. Another aspect to thinking about trapping is if you have priority and you're choosing combats in the combat phase, do just take a second to have a look around the combats, see where any of your models are trapped, i.e. in this position we have 2 goblins against Dwalin and we have a goblin against the Iron Hills warrior. The problem we've got here is if we fight Dwalin's combat first and he loses, he is trapped. He cannot back away because of this goblin here, thus increasing the attacks to wound from the mercenary goblins. So another thing to think about when you're looking at being trapped or trapping opponents, if you have priority in the fight phase and you're picking the order of combats, do just take a second to have a look through the combats, see where you have any warriors trapped, not necessarily by 3 or more enemy models. In this situation you can see Dwalin's in combat with 2 goblin mercenaries, and his pal here, who was supporting him, is in combat with this single goblin mercenary. Now if we fight this combat first and Dwalin loses, he's trapped. His own model is trapping him between the other 2 goblins. The reason that his own model can't back away is because he's already in combat. You cannot back away if you're in combat. So in this situation here, I would choose to fight this combat first, and whether you kill this goblin or not, as soon as you have had that combat, they're no longer in combat. So either the goblin mercenary will back away in this direction, or the Iron Hills warrior will back away in either direction, forwards or backwards. But regardless of what that is, once he's not in combat anymore, he's able to give way to Dwalin if he does lose the combat, like so. Thus, still only taking 2 hits to wound from the goblins rather than 4. Now there's lots more situations where being trapped and trapping come into play. Far too many for me to go through every single one using a diagram or an example on camera. Start thinking about it when you're moving around the board, and you'll soon find that it is something that becomes second nature when you are moving into combat and you're moving miniatures around the board, which is a really sort of good tool to have in your arsenal when playing the game, and you'll find that it changes the way you play totally for the better. So banners are something that when I first started playing, I never really paid too much attention to. I always thought 25 points plus for a banner was quite expensive. I could get X amount more troops for the amount of troops that I would save using the banner. It was kind of, in my head I offset it and it wasn't worth it. I soon realised it was worth it by far. Without the effects the banner has, in certain scenarios you are already on the front foot because you gain points for having a banner, which makes your opponent play the scenario totally different because they'll be chasing you down to kill your banner to take that advantage from you. So barring that, banners themselves are very useful. Having a reroll in fights within 3 inches of a banner is huge, especially if you're able to keep your forces close together in battles. You could get rerolls on any number of fights, from 1 up to possibly 10 combats. That's an extra 10 dice to roll, which is huge. It's massive. And obviously banners get to reroll for themselves again, which is helps them with survivability. They're really good. One thing to keep an eye out for is try and keep them out of line of sight of bowfire, enemy bowfire. Always bear in mind when trying to move them in a position where you're going to get the most benefit from, that they're not in a position where the enemy can heroic combat into them. This is not always possible, but if you can bear it in mind as much as you can, it will help you in your games. In situations like this, the Gondor player has priority. He's choosing the order of combats. Obviously, I'm giving these examples as if you have the choice and you're in control of what's happening. If you haven't got priority, then your enemy would do well to choose to fight the combat for the bannerman first. It's he's outnumbered, he's up against it in the fact that he's -1 to his roll for carrying the banner, and he's up against a pretty formidable opponent with a spear support. So if I was your enemy, I'd be fighting that fight first, taking the banner out and thus stopping the effect against the other combats. The flip side to that is, if you're choosing combats, you would fight the banner fight last. The reason being that everyone who's in range of him gets the extra dice roll prior to him possibly dying. It means that you get a last flurry of usefulness out of the banner in that turn. Also, as you can see, we have a Gondorian captain within range to possibly, if he's got the might, heroic combat and help out the bannerman if needed. So when you're picking your combats in order of which they are taken, if you have a banner in combat, always try and do that combat last. Unless there's a reason why you do it first, which is very rare, but always try and bear in mind you want to keep your banner on the board as long as possible. And if it comes to a situation like this where you think he's not going to be around at the end of this phase, keep him around as long as possible in this final phase that he's going to be on the board, and get the benefits for as long as you can. So monsters. Monsters is another subject where I could spend a whole video just talking about different things you can do to make your monsters have more impact in your games, and different things you can do to try and minimise the effect monsters will have against your army. What we're going to do here is to talk about a couple of things to get you started on your mindset on how to deal with monsters or how to use monsters more effectively. So in this situation here, we can see the Iron Hills Warriors have lined up in formation. They're about to take a hit from this Gundabad Troll. Now, one of the things that you may consider is charging directly into the front of the line, which is great. You're going to do a lot of damage. Gundabad Trolls are very effective. If you're going to use the hurl attack, you're going to get the minimal effect. What you need to do is charge in the flank if possible. by charging in the flank, you can hurl the first dwarf through the whole line of Iron Hills dwarves, thus knocking them all down. You had other models in the vicinity. On the next turn, you're able to charge Iron Hills dwarves, which are lay down, which increases your chance of killing, again, as we spoke about on previous techniques. In a situation where you're the Iron Hills dwarves player, you've got priority, you charge with one of your dwarves and you pass your courage test. Now obviously, as we spoke about before, trapping is something that really helps. In a situation like this, I think I would try and ignore the gun patrol as often as possible. I would charge around the rear as best I could and just tie him up and use my Iron Hills warriors to pick off other smaller, more squishy targets. Thus you're tying up the troll for a turn. He can't really do any damage other than killing one dwarf, which I think for the points difference between the two units is well worth doing for the lower pointed cost dwarf. So spears are another one, similar to banners, where I never paid them much attention. I'd always try and give my troops sort of the most hard-hitting weapons, axes and such where possible. It's only when I started to play Goblin Town who get the Chittering Horde special rule, where basically every model can spear support itself, that I realised how important spear support and having that extra dice in each fight really is. So that alone is a really good tip for your spears. Get arm as many things with spears as possible for 1 point. In every fight you're adding another dice to the roll, which is really important. And also situations like this, like I say, you know, most players would, who are a little bit wet behind the ears, a little bit new to the game, would charge the Dolamroth Knights in this fashion, which there's nothing wrong with, of course. This is fine. You've tied up the two Dolamroth Knights. Unfortunately, Dolamroth Knights are highly likely to win these fights and kill their opponents, which is fine in most situations. You're tying up both Dolamroth Knights. I would say it's more favourable that the Dolamroth Knights are going to kill both of these orcs in this situation, thus you losing two of your models and the Dolamroth Knights able to move on from there. I would now, or what I try to do now in games, is tie up models with as few models of mine as I can and with the least risk. So this is what I would do. So what I've done here, I've charged both Dolamroth Knights with one orc, and then I've spear supported him with an orc at the rear. And the reason this gives me a very slight, I wouldn't say the word is advantage, but if anything it keeps me alive for longer, is the fact that even if I lose this fight, both knights are tied up, they can only kill the orc they're in base contact with, which means that the spear supporting orc stays around till the next turn. We're still rolling the same amount of dice. I'm still rolling 2 dice, the Dolamroth Knights are still rolling 2 dice. The difference is, I have a chance if I win the fight, be it a low chance, but I do have a chance of killing both knights if I win the fight, because I'm still rolling a dice each to wound, but the risk is far less for me. So tips 9 and 10 are kinda one in the same, should we say, but I thought I'd break them down and just talk about them from 2 different perspectives. So your first one is knowing when to strike in a defensive manner. As we can see here, Pippin is in some serious trouble against a Black Shield captain and a Dweller in the Dark, and Aragorn, you know, no problems there. He's fighting against a standard Black Shield warrior. The problem we've got here is if the Black Shield captain heroic combats, they will definitely kill Pippin in this combat. It'd be highly unlikely that that doesn't happen, which now puts Aragorn in serious trouble. He's outnumbered, he's trapped, and he is not the higher fight value. What Aragorn can do in these situations is heroic strike. 9 times out of 10 when you do this, what it does is make your opponent possibly not call the heroic combat and not charge into Aragorn, as Aragorn basically is a beast, and especially if he's struck up and he's going to be the higher fight value, you know, your enemy would be silly to charge him. So in some senses you might think, well, that's a waste of a might point. You're not always going to have Aragorn who gets the free might point, which is fair enough, but using that might point guarantees that your hero stays alive, which I think is what your might points are for, and it's just well worth thinking about when you're in sort of that sort of aggravated end stage of the game. It could be your general who's in trouble of getting countercharged by this catapult effect, and it is something to really consider to keep your general alive, or the hero that you might want to keep alive to do more damage later in the game. It's well worth a might point. So following on from the previous tip of knowing when to strike in a defensive manner, we'll move on to being more aggressive with your strikes. Obviously, if you charge into an enemy hero and your joint fight value, or the enemy hero is a higher fight value, you'd strike, that goes without saying. But there's little tips and tricks that you can use which might catch your opponent off guard, and pull a cheeky little move off that they're not expecting, or they don't know is happening on the board as you're tactically manoeuvring your models around. So I'm making this example very basic. Obviously this would work on numerous different setups, and as long as you've got a clear run from one enemy model through to the model that you're targeting for this move, you can do it in any way, shape or form. So in this situation, the enemy have had priority, they've finished their turn. Azog's charged 2 Iron Hills warriors to mop up the lower fight value troops, which is what Azog does best. You have 2 heroes, in this case they're mounted, they don't have to be as long as the range is there. Being mounted obviously increases the range massively and makes this manoeuvre far more effective. So we've got Thorin on go and Dwalin on go. They are both going to charge the Gundabad warrior. Everything seems fine and dandy, nothing there, a little bit of overkill if anything. But what we're going to do here, one of Thorin or Dwalin will heroic combat, the other will heroic strike. What this does, especially if Azog is out of might and can't counter strike, or doesn't see it coming, doesn't even consider what it is that you're doing, your chances of killing the Gundabad warrior are far greater than not killing him. So you win the heroic combat, you're then free to move on. Both heavy hitters hit into Azog as well. Numerous things have happened here. Azog is outnumbered. He's got 2 big heavy hitting multi-attack heroes in on him, and one of them heroes has heroic struck, so it's highly likely it's going to be a high fight value. Azog is now in serious trouble. This is a move that I have had used against me to great effect, and I've used against other people to great effect. Now if you're playing a very experienced player, it's highly unlikely that they will allow this to happen, again through positioning, which is massive in this game. But it's something to keep an eye out for, because people can become complacent, especially in the later stages of the game where they're concentrating on picking up VPs and thinking about other things. If you get the chance to do it, it's very effective. You can take people's generals out no problem with this move. It doesn't even have to be 2 huge heavy hitters like Thorin and Dwalin. This can work with anything that can heroic strike and get the fight value higher. Trapping an opponent is huge, as we've mentioned before. So that is tip number 10. So that's it, guys. That's my top 10 tips for beginners into Middle-earth SBG. I hope you enjoyed it. It's a lot of fun to do. Just little things that I've picked up on my journey into playing Middle-earth SBG over the years. There's so many more, but like I said, the video would be hours and hours long. If you did enjoy the video and you want to see more, I can do some other videos of similar things. If there's tips that you guys use in-game that you think would be good on video for beginners to pick up, or if you'd prefer more of an in-depth veterans tips for veterans video, let us know and we'll put them together. Like I said, I've really enjoyed doing it, and I would love to do some more videos like this. So thank you for watching, guys, and we will see you in the next video.